There are many types of files. This is not a full breakdown of every file format, but we can break down a few of the most popular formats used in the graphics industry. Let's reveal when and why you would use one format over another. So for graphics files, it helps to clarify that we are most often concerned with bitmap files and vector files, which are widely used as source files for projects. We won't dwell on project formats which are made with project building applications. Instead, let's first break down some of the bitmap file formats. Since high-quality bitmaps can be large and demanding on your computer, many of the bitmap formats attempt to compress files and convert them into much smaller files. Some formats even throw away image detail in the process. These are called lossy formats. Formats that do not throw away image detail are called lossless formats. For professional graphics, which is the best bitmap format for high-res output? The bottom line is that Photoshop PSD is the best choice. First of all, it's lossless. But this format also sets itself apart because it's the only format that contains all of the extra editing information used to make an image look better, such as additional layers and effects. Most bitmap formats do not fully support layers and effects. These so-called flat formats are not as easily editable because those layers and effects are gone. However, they are useful because when you are absolutely sure you're finished editing a bitmap image and desire a smaller file, it's a good idea to save the bitmap into a flat file as a version for output. That will be easier to work with and the file will be much smaller. Each flat format has its purpose. Here are the recommends. An uncompressed TIFF is preferred for high-res lossless output. A PNG file is a compressed file for smaller files that need to support transparency. A PNG file can also be used on the web, but probably the most popular format for the web is the JPEG format, for when you want absolutely the smallest files possible. It's important to note, however, that JPEG is a lossy format. Another lossy format for the web is the GIF format, but that supports self-contained animations, which can be quite useful. For true animation support, however, you should really use a video format such as MP4, but let's stick to still image formats for now. It's also worth mentioning the PDF format. PDF is just a container format that can have any of these formats within it, even vector files. But speaking of vector formats, vector files are not intended for photos. Vector imagery, however, is ideal for shapes, like logos. Unless you embed a bitmap photo inside of a vector files are usually very small in size. Here we have a photo inside of a vector file and you can see it is quite large. This is very inefficient. But as soon as we take the photo out and resave it, the file is much smaller. As we saw with InDesign, there are better ways to combine bitmap and vector files. Just because vector editing applications can link or embed a photo doesn't mean they're particularly good at it. Here are a list of options for vector file formats, with their particular characteristics. The EPS file format is not Illustrator specific. It therefore does not fully support all of Adobe Illustrator's effects. Generally speaking, version 8 of an Illustrator EPS format will contain the most simple, compatible vector format, suitable for import into other applications because it doesn't contain a lot of the Adobe Illustrator effects to begin with. The SVG format is an open, web-compliant format that is becoming increasingly popular. It has the distinct advantage of keeping logos sharp, especially on the web. As I mentioned earlier, PDF is a special container format, and it's very good at containing and combining vector and bitmap imagery. It is most useful for general presentations that do not require animation. PDFs are also a useful format for self-contained high-res output, especially if you are using vector imagery. Adobe Acrobat is an application used to edit or modify PDF files, but is not intended to build a PDF document or presentation from scratch. That is the job of a dedicated project application like InDesign. Applications that build projects or documents by using bitmap and vector imagery together as source material are project applications that have associated project file formats. They are usually proprietary, meaning that they are made by software vendors to build a specific type of project like a video, brochure, presentations, or web pages. And there are just too many to mention. Every time a new project application comes out or gets updated, there is a new format, meaning you can only open it with a new version of the software that created it. It should become intuitive to you as you work that you should open a PSD with Photoshop and use Illustrator to open AI files. The same goes for opening INDD files with InDesign. The file extension just becomes more and more familiar as you work with more of these applications. It makes sense that Adobe also offers many more project applications that work extremely well with native Photoshop and Illustrator files. And although it is discouraged because it is typically less effective, artists can indeed use Photoshop and Illustrator as project applications. There are many pitfalls to this workflow, but there are also some situations where it's actually preferred. It all depends on the goals of the project. Regardless of workflow, it is a good idea to be aware of all of the different applications in the Adobe Creative Cloud suite. Once you have a firm grasp of Photoshop and Illustrator, don't forget to check out the rest of the suite.